2014, Jay-Z and Beyoncé weren't just celebrities, they were royalty, not actual royalty. But in the world of music, they might as well have been. Together, they represented everything people associated with success: money, power, influence, talent, and perhaps most importantly, stability. Because unlike many celebrity relationships that seem to play out publicly in real time, Jay-Z and Beyoncé had built an image that felt almost impossible to penetrate. For years, the public knew very little about what actually happened behind closed doors. There were no reality shows, no constant interviews discussing their relationship, no social media oversharing, no public arguments, no messy breakups, nothing. And that mystery only made people more fascinated, because the less Jay-Z and Beyoncé revealed, the more people wanted to know. Now what's interesting is that their relationship wasn't built like most celebrity relationships. If you've watched our Jay-Z and Beyoncé documentary, then you already know that both artists became stars long before they became a couple. Jay-Z was building Rockefeller. Beyoncé was dominating with Destiny's Child. Both had their own fan bases, their own careers, their own identities. But when they eventually came together, something unusual happened. Instead of one person becoming bigger than the other, they both continued growing together. By the late 2000s, Jay-Z had evolved far beyond music. He wasn't just a rapper anymore. He was becoming one of the most successful businessmen in entertainment. Roc Nation, investments, brand partnerships, ownership deals. Every year his empire seemed to get bigger. Meanwhile, Beyoncé was reaching a level few artists ever achieve. The albums, the tours, the performances, the awards, the cultural impact. She wasn't simply competing with other artists anymore. She was creating her own category. And together, they became the ultimate power couple. Now, one reason the public became so invested in their relationship was because it felt aspirational. People didn't just admire their success, they admired what the relationship appeared to represent: partnership, trust, longevity. Two people at the top of their industries choosing to build together. And because both of them were incredibly private, fans often filled in the blanks themselves. People projected perfection onto them: the perfect marriage, the perfect family, the perfect empire. But here's the problem with perfection: the higher the pedestal, the further the fall. Now by 2012, the couple welcomed their daughter Blue Ivy into the world, and somehow their influence grew even more. Because now they weren't just Jay-Z and Beyoncé. They were becoming a family brand. Every public appearance became news. Every photograph became news. Every performance became news. The fascination surrounding them seemed limitless. And from the outside, everything looked perfect. But appearances can be deceiving, because while the public saw one image, they had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. No idea what pressures came with maintaining that level of fame. No idea what challenges came with living under a microscope. And certainly no idea that one of the biggest celebrity controversies of the decade was only moments away. Because on May 5th, 2014, after one of the most glamorous events in the world, a security camera inside an elevator captured something nobody was supposed to see. And within days, the entire internet would be talking about it. In the next chapter of this story, we're heading to the Met Gala, the night that changed everything. On May 5th, 2014, the biggest names in entertainment gathered in New York City for one of the most exclusive events in the world, the Met Gala, an event where celebrities, athletes, musicians, designers, and business moguls come together for a night of fashion and luxury. For most attendees, it was just another high-profile event. But for Jay-Z, Beyoncé, and Solange Knowles, it would become one of the most talked-about nights of their lives. Now at the time, nothing seemed unusual. Photos were taken, celebrities walked the red carpet, interviews were conducted. The evening unfolded exactly as millions of viewers expected. Jay-Z and Beyoncé looked like the same power couple the public had admired for years. Confident, successful, untouchable. And then the event ended. The family made their way toward a private elevator. What happened next would have remained completely unknown to the public, if not for one major problem. There was a security camera inside. Now initially, nobody knew anything had happened. The night ended. The guests went home, the media moved on, at least temporarily. Then several days later, everything changed. Surveillance footage from inside the elevator leaked online, and within hours, it was everywhere. because the footage appeared to show Beyoncé's sister, Solange Knowles, aggressively confronting Jay-Z, kicking him, swinging at him, being restrained by security, while Beyoncé stood nearby. The footage lasted only moments, but it immediately became one of the most replayed celebrity videos of the decade. And perhaps the most shocking part? Jay-Z barely reacted. Now that's what fascinated people, because nobody watching the video understood what had happened before the elevator doors closed. They only saw the aftermath. They saw the reaction, not the cause. And because of that, the public immediately started asking questions. Why was Solange so angry? What had Jay-Z done? Why was Beyoncé so calm? Had something happened earlier that night, or had something been building for much longer? Suddenly, everybody became an investigator. News outlets started breaking down the footage frame by frame. Talk shows debated it. Blogs analyzed it. Social media exploded. And for the first time in years, Jay-Z and Beyoncé weren't dominating headlines because of music. They were dominating headlines because of mystery. Now, one reason this story became so massive is because it completely contradicted the public image people had of them. Remember, for years they had represented stability, control, privacy, perfection. And then suddenly, the world witnessed something chaotic, something emotional, something human. And it reminded people that behind the billion-dollar empire, there was still a family dealing with real-life problems. Now eventually, the family released a brief statement, but the statement didn't provide many answers. It acknowledged that tensions had occurred. It acknowledged that the family had moved forward, but it didn't explain why. And that omission changed everything. Because when people don't get answers, they create their own. Theories began spreading everywhere. Some believable, some ridiculous, some completely detached from reality, but all of them had one thing in common. Nobody could prove any of them. And that's what made the elevator incident so fascinating. Because unlike most celebrity controversies, there was no definitive explanation, no tell-all interview, no detailed confession, no public breakdown of events, just a few seconds of footage, and years of speculation. Now at first, many people assumed the story would eventually disappear. Just another celebrity scandal that would fade with time. But they were wrong, because the elevator incident wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. And 2 years later, Beyoncé would release a project that completely changed how the public viewed everything that happened that night. In the next chapter, we'll break down the internet investigation, the theories, the silence from the Carter family, and how one leaked video became one of the biggest mysteries in pop culture history. By the summer of 2014, the elevator footage had already become one of the biggest celebrity stories in the world. The video was everywhere: television, radio, blogs, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. No matter where you looked, people were talking about the same thing. What happened inside that elevator? And the strangest part? Nobody actually knew. Because despite millions of views and endless discussions, the footage only showed a few seconds of a much larger story. The world had seen the reaction, but they had never seen the cause. And that uncertainty created the perfect environment for speculation. Now today, we're used to internet investigations. Every celebrity controversy gets dissected online. But in 2014, this was one of the first times social media truly felt like a giant detective agency. People weren't just discussing the footage, they were studying it, frame by frame, analyzing body language, examining facial expressions, looking for clues, trying to answer questions that nobody involved seemed willing to answer. And because Jay-Z, Beyoncé, and Solange remained largely silent, the theories only became more extreme. Some people believed the argument was related to business. Others believed it was connected to family issues. Some believed it had something to do with Jay-Z's friendships. Others thought it involved rumors that had been quietly circulating around the industry for years, and the more time passed, the more theories emerged. Now, what made the situation unique was that there was no clear villain. Depending on where you looked online, you could find completely different narratives. Some people defended Jay-Z, some people defended Solange, some people defended Beyoncé. Everybody seemed to have their own version of events, but nobody had proof. Now, meanwhile, the Carter family continued doing something that frustrated the public even more. They kept moving forward. Public appearances continued. Business ventures continued. Tours continued. Music continued. And despite one of the biggest celebrity controversies of the decade happening around them, they refused to give the public the dramatic explanation everyone wanted. That silence became part of the story itself, because every month that passed without answers created more curiosity, more speculation, more headlines, and eventually, the mystery became larger than the elevator. Now looking back, that's probably why the incident remains so fascinating today. Not because of what we know, but because of what we don't know. Even now, more than a decade later. People still debate what truly happened, because there was never a defining interview, never a detailed breakdown, never a moment where everyone involved sat down and explained the entire situation. The mystery survived, and mysteries tend to live forever. Now, as the years passed, many fans started assuming the story would simply remain unanswered. A strange celebrity moment frozen in time, a mystery with no resolution. But then, in 2016, Beyoncé released an album that changed everything. An album that made people revisit the elevator footage, revisit the rumors, revisit the headlines. And suddenly, the internet believed it had finally found the missing piece of the puzzle. The album was called Lemonade, and for many fans, it felt like Beyoncé was finally speaking, not directly, but through her art. Quick pause. If you're enjoying the documentary so far, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to Fake Famous, and let me know in the comments. Do you think we'll ever know the full truth about what happened in that elevator? Now let's get back to the story. Because in the next chapter, we'll break down how Lemonade and 444 completely changed the public's understanding of the elevator incident and nearly reshaped the legacy of music's most powerful couple. By 2016, the elevator incident was still one of the biggest mysteries in entertainment. People hadn't forgotten. If anything, they had become even more curious, because 2 years had passed, and despite endless speculation, the public still didn't know what had caused the confrontation between Solange and Jay-Z. Then Beyoncé released an album that changed the conversation forever, Lemonade. Now calling Lemonade an album almost feels like an understatement, because this wasn't just a collection of songs, it was a film, a statement, a cultural event. And from the moment it was released, people immediately began searching for clues, because throughout the project, Beyoncé explored themes of betrayal, heartbreak, anger, forgiveness, and healing. And for many listeners, the message seemed obvious. This wasn't just storytelling. This felt personal. Now, whether every song was directly autobiographical is something only Beyoncé truly knows. But that didn't stop the public from drawing conclusions, especially when one lyric completely took over the internet. "He better call Becky with the good hair." And just like that, the investigation exploded all over again, because now people weren't just asking what happened in the elevator. They were asking, was Jay-Z unfaithful? Did Solange know something the public didn't? Was Lemonade explaining what happened that night? The theories became endless. Now social media turned into absolute chaos. Names started circulating. Celebrities found themselves dragged into rumors they had nothing to do with. Entire articles were written trying to identify Becky. Podcasts discussed it. News stations discussed it. Even people who didn't normally follow celebrity gossip suddenly had an opinion, because this wasn't just another album release. This felt like a real-life drama unfolding through music. And the Beehive, they were everywhere, analyzing lyrics, breaking down visuals, connecting dots, searching for meaning in every frame, every word, every scene. Now what made Lemonade so powerful wasn't the controversy. It was the vulnerability. Because for years, Beyoncé had been viewed as almost untouchable, perfect, flawless, beyond criticism. But Lemonade showed something different. It showed pain. It showed anger. It showed resilience. And for many fans, that made her more relatable than ever before. Now, for nearly a year, the public focused almost entirely on Beyoncé's perspective. Then Jay-Z responded. And just like Beyoncé, he responded through music. In 2017, he released 444. And unlike the confident, untouchable version of Jay-Z people were used to seeing, this album felt different, much different. Because for perhaps the first time in his career, Jay-Z sounded vulnerable, reflective, accountable, human. Throughout the album, he discussed family, marriage, mistakes, personal growth, and many listeners interpreted the project as an acknowledgement of the issues that had dominated headlines for years. Now, Jay never sat down and gave the public every detail, but he didn't have to, because for many fans, 444 felt like an answer, not a complete answer, but enough of one. Suddenly, the conversation shifted. The story was no longer what happened in the elevator. Now it became, how did they survive it? Because despite everything, the marriage remained intact, the family remained together, and the empire continued growing, which honestly surprised a lot of people because history is filled with celebrity couples who couldn't survive public controversy. Yet somehow, Jay-Z and Beyoncé emerged stronger, and that's why the elevator incident remains such a fascinating piece of pop culture history. Not because it destroyed the empire, but because it didn't. Because while millions of people expected the story to end in a breakup, the real story was only beginning. And in the final chapter of this documentary, we'll look at what we actually know today, why the mystery still fascinates people more than a decade later, and how one elevator ride became one of the most iconic moments in celebrity history. More than a decade later, people are still talking about the elevator. Think about that for a moment. Thousands of celebrity scandals have come and gone since 2014. Relationships ended, careers collapsed, new controversies replaced old ones. Yet somehow, one elevator ride involving Jay-Z, Beyoncé, and Solange remains part of pop culture history. Why? Because despite everything that's happened since, the world still doesn't know exactly what happened. Now, over the years, pieces of the story have emerged. Jay-Z and Solange eventually appeared to move forward. Public appearances suggested the family had reconciled. The tension that dominated headlines in 2014 seemed to fade, and by all accounts, the family remained united. But what actually caused the confrontation? That's where things become complicated. Because unlike most celebrity controversies, nobody involved has ever given a complete, detailed explanation. There was no tell-all interview, no documentary exposing every detail, no public breakdown of the events leading up to that night. Instead, the people involved chose privacy. And in many ways, that decision may be the reason the story still survives, because unanswered questions tend to live longer than answered ones. Now, looking back today, the elevator incident feels less like a scandal and more like a turning point, not just for Jay-Z and Beyoncé, but for how the public viewed them. Before the elevator, they were often seen as untouchable, perfect, larger than life. After the elevator, people realized they were human. They faced challenges, family disagreements, relationship struggles, the same kinds of issues that affect countless people around the world, and strangely enough, that made them even more relatable. Because perfection creates distance, vulnerability creates connection. Now, another reason the incident remains important is because of what happened afterward. Think about everything that followed. Lemonade, 444, the On the Run tours, Everything is Love, business growth, philanthropy, new ventures, new records, new achievements. Instead of collapsing under pressure, Jay-Z and Beyoncé turned one of the most difficult periods of their lives into a new chapter of growth. And that's probably the biggest lesson from this entire story. The elevator wasn't the end. It was a crossroads, a moment that forced one of the most powerful couples in entertainment to confront challenges publicly. And somehow, they survived. Now today, Jay-Z remains one of the most successful businessmen in music history. Beyoncé remains one of the most influential performers of all time. Blue Ivy has grown up in front of the world. The family continues building its legacy, and despite all the headlines, all the speculation, and all the rumors, they're still standing. That's not something many celebrity couples can say. Now, will we ever learn the full truth about what happened inside that elevator? Maybe. Maybe not. But honestly, that's not what makes the story fascinating anymore. What's fascinating is what happened after, the rebuilding, the growth, the resilience. Because in the end, the most important chapter wasn't the fight, it was the recovery. And that's why the elevator incident continues to be remembered as one of the most iconic moments in celebrity history. Not because it destroyed an empire, but because it didn't. If you enjoyed this documentary, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to Fake Famous, and let me know in the comments. Do you think we'll ever learn the complete truth about what happened in that elevator? And if you've been enjoying our Hip Hop History Month and Beyoncé Week documentaries, make sure you catch up on G-Unit Week, Murder Inc. Week, Rockefeller Week, Jay-Z and Beyoncé, and Rise of the Beehive. Because every one of them is a must-see Rise of the Beehive, because every one of these stories connects to the larger history of music, culture, and celebrity. But we're not done with Beyoncé just yet. Because while we've explored her relationship, her fan base, and one of the biggest controversies of her career, we still haven't answered the biggest question of all. How did Beyoncé take over music? In our next documentary, we're breaking down the complete rise of Beyoncé from a young girl in Houston to one of the most influential artists of all time. Trust me, you don't want to miss that one.